Hello. Thank you for watching Taxpayer Alert. I'm Al Segalla. I'll be your moderator. And our guest this session is Rebecca Callen, our County Auditor Controller. Rebecca, welcome.
Welcome. Thank you.
Okay, Rebecca, you've been here for how long now?
This is I'm ending on my 7th year.
Wow.
I know.
You are part of the institutional memory.
Yeah, I am one of, I think, the longest standing department heads that we have, yes.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
It makes you more valuable, too.
It does.
All right. Looking back and looking at where we are now and looking ahead, what are your feelings about about your job and about the county?
It's really hard to tell. I think we have so many issues that are going on right now that we really don't know what the full outcome is going to be. Right. We're still dealing with Butte Fire over 2 years after the fire was put out. Then we're dealing with Winter Storm. We're dealing with the impacts of cannabis. And whether there's going to be a ban or whether there's going to be ongoing regulation. All of those have a direct fiscal impact to the county overall. In addition, we also have tree mortality. So all of those things, we're talking about 5 federal declarations and 1 state declaration, and then we have cannabis. And all of those have a direct impact to our county's fiscal health or not. And with regards to how is this all going to end, that's really up in the air. So it makes it really, really difficult for us to try to plan too far out ahead of us, because at any moment something could change that's either going to benefit the county from a fiscal standpoint or negatively impact us.
Last night we had a town hall meeting with Congressman Tom McClintock, and the chair of the Board of Supervisors was there, and he asked the question, considering what's been happening in the hurricanes, can we depend on the FEMA money coming that was promised to us? And the congressman couldn't give a clear answer on that because he didn't know.
No. What I can tell you is that there are significant delays on getting our claims. They are. And so
before the hurricane?
Before the hurricane and after the hurricane. Before the hurricane, we still had national disasters that were happening all over the country. Right. Mainly it was other wildfires that were occurring in other states. Yeah. That was pulling resources as well. And we had issues down south. We had issues up north that were all pulling FEMA resources. So we were seeing that impact before Hurricane Irma. Now the hurricanes have hit, it's even worse. Right. And so it's really hard to get someone on the phone. This is just not their priority, and rightfully so. I mean, there are people's lives that right. have directly been impacted right this very second, and they need to make sure that they're protecting those areas. So I am understanding of that. It just has a negative impact to our fiscal resources because we're covering over $10 million of expenses that we're still awaiting claims of over $7 million on.
What happens if no money comes for several years, maybe 3-5 years? What can the county do?
Well, this has been my, at any board member you've gone or board meeting that you've gone to, the conversation about teeter comes up, and right. the conversation about making sure that we have strong reserves and that we have strong contingencies. This right. is exactly why. We need those reserves. We need that teeter balance. We need those contingencies in order to help us through cash flow. Any borrowing mechanisms that we have are for a very short period of time, really just for the fiscal year that we're in. So there's other potentials where we could do some longer term borrowing, but given all of the uncertainty that we have with our county, all you have to do is Google Calaveras County and something's going to come up that's not going to make a bond purchaser super comfortable with doing any kind of unsecured bond. So it would be very difficult for us to be able to borrow. So if we can't borrow, what do we have to do? It means we have to cut our expenditures, which is going to be painful for our local constituency.
I see. Then I understand we have other capital improvement projects coming up that's going to require a lot of money, and I assume that's not bond money.
A lot of the capital projects that we have coming up that are in the budget, those have to do with ADA kind of refurbishing of the old courthouse and making offices available for the board members and I think some additional staff and administration. That is all going to be paid for using the certificates of participation money that we have, and there's about $2 million that's there, so it's not funds that can be used for anything else. I think that people do kind of get concerned, well, why are you spending $2 million on these projects when you could be giving employees raises or whatever? But we can't use that money for anything other than capital expenditures. Yeah. And so it's been sitting there, and we do have to have a plan for it. So we do actually need to move forward with those projects, whether it's all of the deferred maintenance where the windows are still single pane and they're leaking water and they're letting air in. Those types of things all have to be done.
And asbestos?
Asbestos, yeah. Yep.
I understand that our district attorney been living in a trailer. And
that was frightening. When Butte Fire came through, she did contact me and said, what do I do with all of these paper storage boxes? And so, it is a real issue, making sure that we have file retention, that we have backups, that our offices are in secure buildings. So that's something that she has repeatedly brought forward to the Board of Supervisors year after year after year, that we do need to make something available to her that's better than what it is right now.
We want to. She's got first dibs for the offices in the new office building, I think.
She should.
One of the things, of course, is important to your department and other departments too, is having wages that are competitive to retain people, to attract and retain people.
Yeah.
And I think you talked to the Board of Supervisors about that, because it's been a long time.
It has been a very long time, and I think that the Auditor Controller's Office has been passed over for any true reorganizations and any true equity adjustments for years. And this was an issue that my predecessor, Linda Churches, struggled with. This is a problem that I've struggled with the entire time that I've been there. It's very, very hard to, we're not a revenue-generating department. We're the necessary evil. We're the department that has to be there, that is generally not the one that says, yes, go forth and do what you want. We're the ones that say, no, I'm sorry, you cannot do that unless it's allowable under government code or purchasing authority or budget authority. So generally, if you're hearing from my department, it's probably not the call that you want to get. Be that as it may, we are there to ensure internal controls are being followed, to ensure that we have fiscal stability, that we can answer to the taxpayers and make sure that the board is kept apprised of what's happening from a financial perspective. That takes very qualified and educated people. And unfortunately, my department is not being compensated at the level that they should be. They do not have classifications that are equal to what they're doing on a day-to-day basis. They are still held to the same positions that they were in 15 years ago. Well, a lot has changed in 15 years. And what an account tech in my office does is very, very different from an account tech in any other department. My department is reviewing and evaluating and analyzing all of the work from all of the departments, where an account tech in another department, all they're dealing with is that one department. Right. So it's a very different scope of work that my staff were doing, and it just has not been really addressed and dealt with. And I think they get very frustrated when they see reclassifications go through for another department and they're passed over time and time and time again. So it does become demoralizing. And they really, have opportunities outside of the county and even in different departments. But they really love what they do, and they love working for me. And so it's a tough decision, where they could certainly go to another department and make more money and have less work. but they may not like their boss as much.
Well, I can understand that. You're very enjoyable to be around.
Thank you.
Now, that is not always the case with government administrators.
No.
In looking, in doing a wage survey to try to find out what would be comparable to the private sector or maybe other governments, has there been effort along those lines to see what the picture is?
The discussion that I had with HR is that she did look at some comparables, but the issue was in another conversation that I had with her. She said she wasn't entirely sure what my staff did. So I don't really know how you can do a comparable with my staff when you're not completely aware what they do on a day-to-day basis. So she asked for each and every one of my staff to fill out a desk survey, and this was a survey that she gleaned, I believe, from Tuolumne County, and thus far I'm not aware of any other departments that have been required to have their staff fill out this desk survey.
What kind of survey was that?
It's called a desk survey or a desk audit.
Not a death.
No, desk.
Oh, okay.
And it's a packet that's basically trying to figure out what you do on a day-to-day basis. Yeah. But no one else has been filling that out. This is a brand new form that she got, and this has been a discussion that I've been having with this HR. The prior HR, the HR before that, and now this is, I think, the 5th or 6th CAO that I've had this discussion with. And, the board meeting where I did make a discussion about this point, right. There was no one on that board that disagreed with me. And there was no one in the public that disagreed with me. No. But there was still no action taken.
We were all crying.
So I think that's the frustration is no one's in disagreement with me. There's still no action taken. And so my staff are still in the same position that they're in.
Don't all employees have a job description?
All employees have a job description. And so what I've been fighting for with my office is that my employees should not be in the jobs that they're in. Years ago, when we had significant shortfalls in revenue and we had to cut and we had to lay people off, my office lost the top layer of accountants. And that meant all of that work didn't go away. We're still mandated to do the reporting. We're still mandated to ensure internal controls are being followed. It just meant all that work got disseminated down. So all the staff that didn't have those work and those tasks on their plates, they have them now. But they never got any retribution for that. They never got an equity adjustment. They never got a reclassification. They just got the additional workload.
I see. So it seemed like it's not very fair to them.
I think it's very not fair to them.
Part of the problem, I guess, what you're facing is other departments are facing is uncertainties as to the budget, as to whether there be enough money.
That's a really big issue. I guess part of my frustration, though, is that non-general fund departments have been able to add staff because they're non-general fund. However, adding staff to a non-general fund department does actually create a general fund liability. PERS. We don't have a PERS contract for general fund and non-general fund. We just have a safety PERS contract and a non-safety PERS contract.
Right.
So if you add staff in public works or health and human services or mental health or public health or any other department where they're non-general fund, that still creates an unfunded liability to our PERS contract. And that unfunded CalPERS. Yeah. And that unfunded liability creates an increased employer contribution, and that increased employer contribution is paid by all of us, including the general fund. So when non-general fund departments are adding staff because they're allowed to, or reclassify staff to higher compensation levels because they're allowed to because they have funding for it, it still impacts the general fund. It just will impact it 2 years later when the PERS rates come out.
Is there any light in the tunnel on CalPERS? I understand that the direction they're going is very hurtful to communities or cities and counties, and some of them have gone bankrupt over it. And
so the one thing that we have going for us is, and I have fought very hard for the taxpayers on this, is not to do anything that would create a huge unfunded liability burden to us. Several years ago, the unions were looking at going to CalPERS Health. That would have created tens of millions of dollars of unfunded liability.
Right.
I absolutely stuck my feet in the sand on that one and said, no way. Not because, I don't want to, consider health benefits different than what we currently have. It's just the cost of CalPERS Health is way too much for us to be able to afford on a long-term basis. However, what CalPERS has done is they're trying to do everything they possibly can to pay that unfunded liability down. Well, the only way to pay it is to cause the employers to pay more.
Right.
And so it's this rolling 5-year kind of amortization schedule. And so I think it's going to hurt for several years before it gets better after that period of time. And it's probably going to be more than 10, 15 years before we're kind of out of the woods. The unfunded liability by default will be getting paid down, and it will be shrinking quite significantly over the next few years just because we're paying so much on an annual basis to CalPERS. But unfortunately, that's just what's going to happen. And that means a loss of services for the public because we have to come up with the funds to pay for that.
Right.
And that's the unfortunate part.
Is there light at the end of the tunnel? Is there a possibility of, I understand to get out of CalPERS, you have to come up with like $40 million to give the state, and then you can set up a different plan.
Right.
And I'm wondering if the $40 million could be done on installments in some way.
No. And actually, it would be more than that because what they do is when they're calculating the unfunded liability, they're assuming you're going to continue to participate in the plan. So they're giving you a credit for the earnings that are going to happen over the life of the participants.
Right.
So if you wanted to completely get out, they will not give you that discount rate of the 7.25%. They're going to make you pay full board, and so it could cost us $60 million to get out. What I did discuss at the last board meeting, or at the board meeting with regards to budget, is that I do think that there are some opportunities for us that, if we can have any sort of funds that we could set aside into an IRS 115 plan, a trust, that would be probably very beneficial for us. You have to have money in order to invest it, but we potentially could invest it and have higher earnings than we're getting through CalPERS, and then use those earnings to offset our payments and our unfunded liability. So that would definitely be something that the board is going to have to start addressing as part of their policy decisions. That maybe at the end of every year, if we have cash carry. You hear cash carry a lot at the budget hearings, that maybe a percentage of that cash carry needs to go towards PERS. That would be a way to help us smooth it and to have some control over those expenditures. But other than that, there's not really much else we can do.
Okay.
Kind of depressing.
Yeah. Well, just start crying here. Now, one of the things that's a big unknown is the cannabis issue. And I understand that the 3 board members are in favor of an overall ban of everything they can ban. And but there's problems in that they're presently operating on a regulatory type system that's bringing in money. And also there's money that's already been collected. And then there's an effect on the economy. I understand that cannabis is as much as 25% of our economy, which is pretty significant. I think that if they pass a ban on everything and assume that it's legally can, be approved by the courts, then what would be the budgetary consequences for taxpayers?
So, I think my concern is that I don't know if the board is fully aware of what the unwind is going to be if they do a ban, and what the impacts are going to be on the county as a whole and on the taxpayer. Certainly, if the board had on the get-go decided that they didn't want to have commercial cultivation in the county, they could have stopped it on day one, and then
that'd be different.
It would be different.
Yeah.
But you're already in it. It's not like, you're pregnant. You're not going to be unpregnant because you're not going to be pregnant anymore.
You can't be a little bit pregnant?
No, you're not a little bit pregnant. We're just pregnant. So the problem is the train's already going. And so trying at this point to kind of unwind this and stop the train, it's going to be really, really difficult. And there are going to be a slew of administrative issues that we're going to be running into that are going to cost money.
Right.
And we're not going to have any sources of revenue in order to pay for that other than tax dollars.
Right.
So, whether it's abating what was a registered grow that's no longer a registered grow, whether it's the abatement of the grows that were never registered to begin with, it's what funds do we need to pay back, and how much of the funds that are left are going to have to go back, and how are they going to go back, and how are we going to allocate those dollars, and then what happens if you put a lien on a property and 5 years from now the homeowner pays.
Yeah.
And so all of these concepts, it's not a clean cut. There's not a clean way to just get out of it.
Right.
There is this ongoing labor-intensive, administrative-intensive process that every department is going to be impacted by in some way or another, and it doesn't go away because a ban gets passed. If they had done this right off the get-go, this would be an entirely different conversation because we wouldn't be pregnant. We are pregnant. So there's very difficult discussions and decisions that are going to have to be made, and I'm not entirely sure if the board, I've listened to the board meetings with regards to cannabis, and I don't hear where there is very straightforward, honest discussions about what the overall budgetary impacts are going to be. We collected $5 million in excise taxes last fiscal year.
Yeah.
We collected $2 million of excise taxes this fiscal year.
Right.
Our budget is on top of those excise dollars. Every year we have had to use teeter as stopgaps because revenues were less than our expenditures. And this year we didn't have to use teeter. That's not because our non-cannabis revenues were so much higher than they've been in all these previous years. It was because we had $7 million of cannabis tax money that came in. Kind of regardless of how you feel about cannabis, whether you're supporting a ban or not supporting a ban, the bottom line is we just balanced our budget off excise tax.
Right.
So what happens in the next budget? I don't think that we're going to have $7 million of cash carry on June 30th of 2018. I don't think that's going to happen. So where do the funds come from when we built a budget based on those excise dollars? And where does the staff go? We hired over 20 people related to cannabis. Those people are going to have to be laid off. When you lay off those employees, it triggers actions in those contracts with those unions that then we have to get rid of our extra hires. This is going to have an impact and a trickle-down impact on all of the constituency in the county, regardless of which side you fall on. But I think, unfortunately, there are a lot of repercussions for a ban. That if they just hadn't done it to begin with, then we wouldn't have those same repercussions. The fact that we are over a year past, it's already been going forward. So trying to undo it now and think that we're going to do it cleanly is just not a possibility.
There's a positive side. It seems like the people that have passed the test and are not creating any problem, and they're not polluting anything, and seem to be prosperous. Well, that I guess is really hard to predict that. I get we might have a situation where we don't have money, and that goes back to the same thing. If FEMA doesn't pay, we have to figure how we're going to borrow money to continue. I think you have certificate of deposits that you can do.
We had certificates of participation. Those are still outstanding until 2036. We've already borrowed everything that we can possibly borrow.
Oh, so no more. Okay.
No.
Well, that's pretty grim.
It is grim. And so our borrowing capacity is going to be pretty much nil to none. So at that point, we're really looking at just a reduction in overall expenditures, a reduction in the size of our budget.
Which means reduction in personnel, because personnel is the most of the budget.
Yeah. So I don't feel like the board is completely aware that that's the direction that we're going in. And I don't know, I guess, other than this conversation, how that's going to get through to them. But they have their own beliefs on that everything's going to be okay and everything's going to be all right. And I think many of us are sitting here shaking our head.
The board watches this show.
Yeah, well, they should take note, because there are a lot of issues. It's not going to be a clean action if a ban happens.
It makes things more complicated. I understand the state has finally come out with these regulations to practically control the commercial industry, where they trace
it's all track and trace.
Yeah, track and trace and everything. And it's almost like we're going in the wrong direction, or the state is in the wrong direction.
Yeah, I don't know. When the prior board had talked about going in this direction, I politically don't get involved. If that's the direction the board wants to go, then that's the direction we go. If the public wants to go in a direction and they vote on an initiative, then that's what we have to support.
Yeah.
But at this point, I just look at it that there are going to be fiscal impacts to our entire county that are not going to go away because a ban passes. We're too far into it, and I hope that the board listens, and I hope that they can consider some other alternatives that can help their constituency.
You're the bean counter, and you're telling us there's not enough beans.
There's not enough
beans.
No.
Okay, well, the important thing is to try to get wisdom. This is what this show is all about. It's wisdom, and to improve communication and find solutions, and above all else, be kind to each other.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's hard.
Yes.
And so as we wind this up, what would your departing thoughts be?
I think that we as a county need to communicate better with each other. I think we need to support one another. And I think that we need to just be really honest with one another.
Well, that seems to be a rule of life. That work anywhere.
I think if everyone did that, life would be a lot easier.
Well, Rebecca, thank you for being with us. And we'll see you again.
All righty.
Thank you for watching Taxpayer Alert. See you next time.